Hello! I've read chapter 7 of Master of the Jedi, The Desperate Mission. I'm probably going to merge this with chapter 8 once I read that. So, yeah. So, we pick up where we left off. Dr. Anton, there we go. And Obi-Wan they put Roan into the cocoon and it take a speeder and fly off to the 11. And it turns out Will is not an Imperial as I thought. He was actually the leader of the 11. It turns out they're trying to figure out where Ferrous Solon is through Rome, but because of his very poor condition, he can't tell them. Presumably he's unconscious. But the book doesn't really say. They think once, eventually when they do get to the 11's base though, they realise, Anton realises Obi-Wan is not a member of the 11. And we have an interrogation scene between Will, Anton and 8 others. One of them called Rilla. And of course everyone's trying to convince them. And eventually Will says, if you know Ferrous Solon, what's his secret? He would have told you his secret. What did he do in his early years? And everyone says that he trained as a Jedi in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. He lived there. And they're convinced at that point. One of them is still a bit sceptical. I think that was Rilla, the one that was sceptical. But then, of course, Obi-Wan force pulls the blaster rifle from Will's hand, and she's convinced. Anton is now an official member of the 11 because they threatened son Adam. It could be Adam, but it's Adam with a. It would be Adam with an E is there the second A, so it would be A-D-E-M, Adam. Then they kind of start talking about how much they were missing Ferrous, and how Obi-Wan's absolutely shocked at this because Ferrous he knew was a very careful rule. Was a really careful rule follower, as it's described in the book. But then he realises, actually, there were all the elements of him being being able to start the 11, because it's established him and Roan started the 11, which, you know, that makes sense. That makes full sense to him being found out as a Jedi, honestly, because the 11 is well known on Belarsa. But, we also find out a little bit more about how the 11 operates. We find out they're called the 11 because because the first members, it was formed from 11 people. Obviously. The name sounds very obvious once you know that. And we learn that they have their own shadow net, where they kind of expose the truth of what the Empire's doing, rather than their clouded our world is perfect things. We also learn that the Empire is wanting to use Ferrous Solon as an example, where if they can imprison Ferrous and detain him, then the message will be the Empire will capture and detain rebellion. Whereas if Ferrous is still able to go free, then it will be a symbol of hope and freedom and resistance against the Empire. And again, we're reminded that Dr. Anton, she doesn't know what's killing Roan. She doesn't know. Obi-Wan volunteers that if he can get into the Imperial garrison, he'll find out what, he'll try to help any way he can. So there are two main things that need to be done, because Ferris presumably is assumed to still believe Roan is in prison, not in the medical clinic or now with the 11. So they need to tell him, hey, you can't get, hey, Roan isn't in the prison. They're over here. He's over here with us. We got him. Don't go back to the prison. And of course he's got to try and find what's killing. Obi-Wan's got to try and find out what's killing Roan, so they can save him. I did kind of spoil myself because I looked at Roan's Wikipedia page. I got to stop doing that, and it said he dies. So that's a bit of a spoiler. Not sure, but of course it could be in a future book. As far as I know, it could be from it could be mentioned in a source book that he died. So, well, I do think it is probably likely he'll be in this book. You never know. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much, I think, everything of note in the chapter. Again, I quite enjoyed it, and it's definitely getting quite gripping and interesting now, and we've learned that Obi-Wan now knows why he's out here, not just to help an old friend in Ferris Olin, but to help start that rebellion for Luke to join when he's older. And it's getting quite interesting. Again, I think I mentioned this in one of the previous reviews, but I think this is what people would have preferred as the Obi-Wan show over what we ended up getting. Of course, if they were adapting all of the Last of the Jedi books, I'm fairly sure they would have to call it Last of the Jedi or Tales of Ferris Olin or something like that, because of, I'm fairly sure Obi-Wan does not appear in the later books, or as only the occasional appearance. Because I know Ferris Olin takes becomes one of the main characters later on in the books, I'm fairly sure. So yeah, but anyway, I enjoyed the chapter. It was a bit of a subversion of expectations, because we didn't really know a whole lot about Will in the previous chapter, and I kind of assumed he was an Imperial from the garrison that was mentioned, but no, he's well, they do say they don't have a leader, and Ferris was really their leader. Contradictory, I know, but that's pretty much how the book says it. We do learn that Will definitely seems to be taking on that leader role, even which seems to be in command while Ferris is absent. So it's quite interesting. I'll say that it's quite interesting, and I'll be curious as well to see if Valorum learns of Obi-Wan's presence on the planet. I think that would be quite interesting, because again, I did not expect them to get in the same room in the last chapter. I was not expecting that. Of course, they didn't meet because Obi-Wan was in the cocoon, but I wasn't expecting them to get into the same room as each other. I thought it was going to be a bit like an Anakin and Grievous situation where they don't meet, and they can get close, but they're never extremely close. I was kind of expecting it to be like that, but no, they get very close to each other. Always too close for comfort, so yeah, that was quite the surprise. I'm talking about last chapter, and I should be talking about chapter 7? Yeah, chapter 7. I've opened the book, and then I could see chapter 8, so that's a bit funny. But yeah. I don't really have much else to say. The book's intriguing so far. again, I'm intrigued to see where it would go. I knew Obi-Wan was going to be a big player in this book, just purely based on the cover. He's literally the only character on the cover in the main releases, but I wasn't expecting him to be such a big player as he was in the book so far, because we're almost halfway, because I'm close to being halfway through it, and we still haven't seen Ferrus Solon. We've just heard about him, and so I wasn't expecting that. But yeah. Anyway, I'm in the review here. You're going to see probably my chapter 8 review pop up right now, in a moment. So, because I'm probably going to merge them two, like I did with chapters, 2 and 3, so, yeah. Thank you all for watching, goodbye. I've just read chapter 8 of The Last of the Jedi, the Test Book Mission, and this is a really sweet chapter. We finally get to see Ferrus Solon. We cut to him, and he's apparently in the mountains in a cabin with someone called Donna. It's D-O-N-A, not double N. It's just a single N. So maybe it's Donna, but it's probably Donna. Let's be honest. We learn a bit about Ferrus after his time as a Jedi. We learn, and also a little bit about his escape. We learn that he was wounded in the escape. How Donna has been looking after him for about the past week since then. And we learn that he's a little bit fed up with Donna. Donna has been taking really good care of him and been feeding him so much that it just literally describes his eyes as floating. And it says, and he wished to repay her by busting himself out of there, or something like that. Just wanting to get out of the cabin. And later on it does say that he is fond of Donna. He is fond of her. And she did take him in. How she looked after her, sorry, I'm getting all mixed up here. How she looked after him, how she would literally die for him if it come to that, and how she is trying to hide Ferrus from seeker droids that may be coming up the mountain. We learn that he kind of does want to go out and help Donna collect the supplies, get wood, get the food in the village just down the mountain, about an hour down, but he can't because, again, the wound, but also to do so will be risking being caught and being killed. And we learn a little bit about his time as a Jedi and his time after leaving the Jedi Order, and it's ever so sweet. We do know that from an email, Roland and Ferrus Solon did marry. So yeah, I do have that context from them too, and you can really see it in how their little backstory is described in the book, and it's ever so sweet. It is. Ferrus Solon was very confused after he came out of the Jedi Order. He just felt lost. It literally said he was bewildered. He couldn't quite figure normal life out back when he was a Jedi, you know. The decisions were pretty much made for him. The main thing that mattered was submission. But then he had to kind of put a lot of focus into his decisions, and it took him months, and he was infuriating at first, and he learns how he could have preferences, and it's very interesting, because you don't really think about that But the way with the Jedi Order works, yeah, this is probably going to be the chapter I have the most to say about, but it was very interesting to see to get a bit of insight into how the Order works, because again, you know about it, but it's not often brought up. So it is very interesting. But we learn that at one point he went into a cafe, I think it was with Rolands in there, and he just spent a lot of time trying to decide whether to have a muffin or a roll, and Rome found it absolutely hilarious, and they sat down and talked with each other all through breakfast up until lunch. And it goes on to say that in all that confusion after leaving the Jedi Order, as it says in the book, it was Roan who saved him. Let me... Hold on. It was Roan who had saved him, Roan who had shown him what it meant to have a home. And you know, it is a very sweet thing. We don't really know a lot about Roan's character at the moment, but you can tell he's very sweet with Ferris. It's a very sweet relationship. And it even says when Ferris came up with the idea for the business Olin Lands, Roan literally sold everything he had to finance it. And we learn that Donna was their very first client, and how she, for 3 months, had gathered evidence on the vaccine that was going to be issued out to children that was contaminated by, and she was wanting to take the corporation she was working for to court because of it. But she knew by doing so she would probably get fired, and also would probably be the target of assassination attempts. And Ferris and Olin Lands, of course, helped her, and gave her a new identity and such. And kind of spirited her away with that, by giving her that new identity. And was she successful? Yeah, she was. She brought down the corporation that was issuing it, but also the government were trying to cover up the vaccinations in the book. So yeah, that was actually quite the twist to read about with this. So, and Ferris kept trying to convince Donna, you would have made it out on your own, even without me and Roan. But she continues to deny it, and and she believes that Roan and Ferris saved her. And eventually Ferris is looking out a window, and Donna gets very frustrated with that, because we don't know if the Imperial Seeker, if there's going to be Imperial Seeker droids. If they see you, that could put you into a lot of trouble. You know, because of course Ferris is meant to be incognito. He's not meant to be seen, but he keeps looking out the window apparently. And it's funny because then he is gonna say, and I've made a lovely pot of, and before she can even finish, Ferris thinks, oh no, not more soup. And he intervenes and says no thank you, but before he could say anything more, he tries to flick a switch which he thinks will turn on a light, and it ends up opening a chute that leads him sliding down of somewhere, and he bumps his head, and you just have Donna pop over the pop her head out over the opening and go, soup. And Varys just nods. That was quite funny, honestly. But in addition to that scene, there is a very heartbreaking kind of line with that. I'll read it out. He looked up into the gloom. Donna looked down into the passage, squinting at him while he rubbed his head. Soup? She asked. Roan, I can't wait to tell you about this. Stay alive. Stay alive so we can laugh again. Ferris begged in his head, and he nodded. And that's how the chapter ends. This was ever such a sweet chapter, it really was. Learning about Ferris and Roan, it just warms your heart, it does. It's ever such a sweet chapter. It really is. So I think that's probably my favourite chapter so far. But we have got there are 20 chapters, so there's still quite a few left to go. We've got about 12. So other chapters could become my favourite, but so far I think this is my favourite chapter. It's just ever such a wonderful and sweet chapter. It really is. And then it's of course quite a few interesting things in there as well, but it's just so lovely and sweet, this one. I know I keep saying that, but it is. I think this is my favourite chapter so far. So yeah. Thank you all for watching. I don't know if I'll be merging this with the Chapter 9 review, and I'm merging this with the Chapter 7 review. I'm not sure if I'll merge it with the Chapter 9 review. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, we'll see. So, yeah. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye. I've just read Chapter 9 of The Last of the Jedi, The Desperate Mission. Hello. Again, this is one of the shorter chapters, and I am happy we're going back to the shorter chapters. As I said in one of the previous reviews, I do prefer the shorter chapters. I do like when we get shorter chapters, at least somewhat frequently. It just pleasantly breaks up how tiring longer chapters can be. And I think that was a problem I had with Plagueis. Sometimes there was just most of the chapters felt like they went on and on and on, and there wasn't really any short chapters in Plagueis, whereas in this book you get that occasional short chapter. I do wish we got them maybe a little bit more frequently, but typically the chapters seem to be ranging from 5 pages to 10 to 14, 15. They tend to go up to about those numbers so far. I think there's been about one 15-page chapter, which I think was chapter 6. But yeah, but let's get into chapter 9 in specific. So we learn a little bit about the culture on the Balasa and the city of Usa. We learn that in the Moonstone district, I think that's what it was called, or the district by Moonstone Lake or whatever it was, that if you hold a steaming teacup in a disposable steaming teacup in your left hand, apparently people in the black market will approach you. It's like a little call sign. And Obi-Wan was told that by Willem Willer. And so you get a little bit of that kind of cultural stuff with Belarus, and it's nice that they are developing that. It is. I quite like that they are, that Jude Watson is taking that time to develop the planet of Belarus, because again, Belarus is a new planet. In the context of The Last of the Jedi, it was a planet created for the book, and I do like that she's taken that time to write an in-depth culture while not having it hinder the story in any way. You know, we're not breaking up the story like in Plagueis. I think, what was it, chapter 6 or 5 in Plagueis? One of the problems I had before I went and reread the book was the fact that we had that at the start of the chapter. It really did feel like we went on and on talking about how fabulous the Munalist was, and it was, I just want to get to the story. I remember feeling that way. I don't so much feel that way now, but it was definitely something I felt when I was trying to go through the book originally. And it was definitely something that really did stick out to me, and it was, can't we just learn about this while in the story, rather than having to briefly pause the story to get this background? So I do like that Jude Watson is taking that time to develop the world of Belarus and the culture there and everything, but still doing it in a way that doesn't hinder the story. It doesn't have to bring the story to a stop. Even in the previous chapter where that was kind of happening, the way it's done, you can very much easily see it from if it was in Ferris's mind. And so I do like that Jude Watson is taking that time to develop the culture. And we learn that even the Empire just can't quite crack why having a teacup in your left hand is a cool sign. They just can't quite crack why. And we learn from Will that the Empire, they keep taking away stuff. They may take away their... Well, let me check. Here's the quote. "You see," Willard said, "they can have our government, they can press and our factories, but they cannot have our loyalty. Their spies do not work here." Rilla had nodded. "It is why they hate Ferris so much. No one will betray him, not even for all the credits on Belarus. It will give other planets hope." And again, you're learning about this planet, and it's very wonderful to learn about the culture going on on the planet, and learn how these different characters, learn about how what the culture of the planet is. And I keep saying that, but that's what it is. We're learning about the culture of the planet. We're learning that the Belarusans are loyal, how they don't really stand for any nonsense from the Empire, how they will willingly fight against it for their freedom. And we just... It's done in such a way where, again, it doesn't interrupt the story. And I like that. It's not like Plagueis where it can interrupt the story. I like that it's not. Anyway, Obi-Wan is eventually directed by a woman who tried to sell to him some of the stuff, as he says, sorry, and she says, "What are you looking for?" And Obi-Wan goes, "Clothing." And she says, I've only got tech, data pads, cloud car items," but she directs him to an alley, and guess who pops up? None other than Trevor Flume from earlier. And I completely forgot he was in the books. I should have expected him to pop up. I'm fairly sure he was even mentioned in the last chapter. No, not the last chapter, the chapter before. So I, for some reason, completely forgot Trevor existed in the story, but there he was. He was in the story. And the first line he says, it is funny. It's, oh no, not you again. or something along the lines of that. And it is funny to see him and Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan is really trying to do stuff, and Trevor just isn't really that cooperative. So it is funny to see how Obi-Wan's trying to do all of this and Trevor just isn't cooperating in the way he would like him to. So yeah, but eventually he leads him over to a warehouse and he gives him the Imperial uniform. And we learn that Trevor really does care about Ferris. And he says, if you find Ferris, and he pauses for a moment and he says, hold on, what does he say? Tell him he stinks like a bantha. But from how Trevor is as a character, from what I've gathered so far, it is said in the book his attitude is hiding his grief over his family. And I do think his way of being mean and his, I assume it's also a little bit of being a bit sarcastic, is his way of coping. And while we don't really know a whole lot between what he and Ferris had so far, what Ferris did for him, you can kind of tell that they had a very close bond. I would not surprise me if Ferris took in Trevor, was the one ended up taking in Trevor after his father was unfortunately blown up. So yeah, again, this is all working off of assumption, we don't know yet, but it is utterly sweet and heartwarming. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see more of Trevor. I'm going to say that. I'm intrigued to see more of Trevor, and I know he appears in the future books, and he's literally on the cover of Underworld, so I know he's going to appear again at some point. But I'll be interested to see his relation between Ferris and him. I'll be interested to see, does Trevor remind Ferris of Roan? Does Trevor kind of see Trevor as his son in a way? I'll be interested to see what their dynamic is. Or does Ferris see him as a friend or whatever? Again, I'll be interested to see what their dynamic is like, because you can very clearly tell there is a very close relation between them, but you don't quite know yet. And it's intriguing. This is definitely the most in-depth review I've done so far, because most of the time it's just like, great, love to end it, but now I'm getting quite into this now, aren't I? So yeah, I'll be intrigued to see where Trevor's story goes. But anyway, Obi-Wan's got the Imperial uniform again. Remember, he's trying to break into the Imperial garrison, presumably to somehow kind of get the proof or something to tell, or try and find a way to contact Ferris, tell him, hey, Roan, he's not there. But to be fair, that probably wouldn't work. It would probably just would leak Ferris's location. But maybe it. But it's trying to find the new road, what's slowly killing Roan. And I do hope that we do see Roan conscious again, because it is described in one of the previous chapters. He has got his green eyes open. I do want to know what he's properly like as a character, because we mainly have heard about what he's like, but not necessarily seen what he's like. And so I would like to see what he is like as a character. Count how many times I said like there. So yeah, I'll be intrigued to see what Roan is like as a character. And so far, based on what we were told in the previous chapter, I do very much like Roan. He's a very sweet character, I think. I think him and Feathers may just make their way to being some of my favourite Star Wars couples. I know that happened with Kyle Katarn and Channels when I read the Dark Forces novellas. So maybe that will also happen with Feather Solon and Ronance. But yeah, that's my review of Chapter 9. I'll soon be on to I'll soon read Chapter 10, and I'll be halfway through the book then when it comes to the chapters. And page 84 is the official halfway points in the pages, but yeah, chapter wise it will be Chapter 10, so I'll almost halfway through the book in about a day. So yeah, that's my review then. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.